Of all the various xenos races known to exist within the galaxy, few are as feared or as poorly understood as the species known as the Hrud. The Hrud are themselves one of the oldest races known to currently exist within the galaxy, having begun their slow spread across the vast expanse of space long before the evolution of humanity. Some have even suggested that the Hrud were one of the many species whose existence and evolution had been engineered by the ancient and mysterious beings known as the Old Ones, due primarily to the fact that the religious beliefs of the Hrud are highly similar in many aspects, if not outright identical, to those held by the Eldari, a race whose evolution had also been guided by the Old Ones. The Hrud are often described as being a nocturnal or subterranean race, often abhorred and reviled by others, with many viewing the creatures as being little more than parasites and vermin. Indeed, the Hrud are known for their propensity to scavenge and salvage any examples of technology that they come across, from which they will reverse engineer entirely new devices, or even, for lack of a better term, Frankenstein multiple objects together into an entirely new, fully functional form. Such is the common perception of the Hrud that whenever members of the species congregate en masse, such gatherings are often referred to as infestations. Despite the fact that many races will often regard such creatures as being little more than lowly pests, the Hrud have developed a surprisingly sophisticated civilization that belies their reputation, creating many highly advanced technologies, some of which even being temporal in nature, as well as being nigh unparalleled in the arts of record-keeping, with the species being documented as maintaining vast archives that contain incredible amounts of historical data, cultural lore, and technological schematics. Hrud society is also known to be tribalistic in nature, with each tribe being said to dwell within vast subterranean tunnel cities known as Junelacs. Whenever a Hrud tribe grows beyond a certain size, it will eventually begin to break down and fracture into a number of smaller tribes. Each of these newly established tribes will then embark upon a mass migration known to the creatures as Peha in order to seek out and establish their own tribal territories. It is during the course of these migrations that the Hrud will often come into conflict with other races who will typically view these wandering tribes in a manner more akin to that of an invading army. Indeed, Hrud migrations have been widely documented as leaving vast trails of destruction and desolation in their wake, resulting in them becoming rightly feared by the other denizens of the galaxy. This is due in part to the creature's innate ability to project a time-distorting entropic field around their bodies. Not only can this field rapidly age everything caught within it, be it biological or mechanical in nature, but should enough Hrud congregate within a singular location, then this field will begin to grow greater and greater in potency until it becomes capable of not only distorting time, but also the very fabric of reality itself. A notable example of this occurring was during the invasion of Harkanath, the homeworld of the Star Phantoms chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. As the Hrud began congregating in greater and greater numbers, their entropic fields would eventually grow to be so intense that any space marines caught within these aggregate fields would be slain, due to their bodies being horrifically distorted into a variety of unnatural and impossible angles. While this entropic field exhibited by the Hrud is widely documented, it is far from being the only danger that is posed by such creatures. The bodies of the Hrud are themselves capable of synthesizing a variety of toxins, which can range from deadly neurotoxins to intense and addictive narcotics, with the latter of which often being used to pacify any individuals that the Hrud may have taken to serve the tribe as slaves or pets. As well as this, the Hrud are capable of exuding an aura known as a sea mist, which is capable of affecting the very vision of others, resulting in the Hrud appearing as little more than shadows and silhouettes to those that look upon them. While it remains unclear as to whether this visual distortion is a result of various biochemicals exuded by the Hrud themselves, or if it is generated by some unknown technological or psychic process, it is nonetheless capable of affecting both biological and mechanical senses. meaning that should a Hrud ever be recorded by a security camera, the resulting footage will simply depict the creature as a hulking, shifting shadow. Because of this, a number of supposedly contradictory accounts have arisen regarding as to what the Hrud truly look like, with two descriptions in particular having become fairly prominent. One depicting the creatures as being akin to humanoid rodents, with the second portraying them as being more insectoid with long, gangly limbs. But what could be the reason behind the differing appearances given for the Hrud? One of the earliest documented accounts regarding the appearance of the Hrud, as detailed within the 3rd edition Warhammer 40,000 rulebook, is a hunched and hooded figure wielding a rifle and sporting a long rat-like tail. However, this particular depiction of the Hrud would be contradicted by the book Xenology, which seemingly portrayed the creatures in an altogether different manner. Instead of being akin to rodents, as was commonly believed by many, the Hrud documented within Xenology was shown to sport long, gangly limbs that were formed in a manner analogous to a set of vertebrae, as well as sporting a pair of mandibles, in addition to a wide set of jaws filled with razor-sharp teeth, with no evidence to suggest the existence of a long tail. While this particular depiction given for the Hrud would indeed become more widespread within official records, examples of the more rodent-like Hrud would continue to be documented, as shown within the 6th edition Warhammer 40,000 rulebook. One of the most recent descriptions given for the Hrud, as shown within the book The Liber Xenologies, would state that the Hrud boasted limbs which bent in a manner that was, for lack of a better term, wrong, suggesting that the Hrud encountered by eyewitnesses demonstrated an appearance that was more reminiscent to that shown within Xenology, which, as mentioned earlier, portrayed the creatures as having long, spine-like limbs which would indeed bend and contort in a vastly different manner to the limbs sported by many other vertebrate organisms, earning the creatures the nickname of bendies. Beyond this particular description, however, it remains impossible to truly confirm whether or not this particular Hrud sported an appearance that is any way similar to the specimen documented within Xenology, due in part to the fact that all documented images of the Hrud within this particular tome have for one reason or another been redacted. Admittedly, however, there is a possibility that both depictions regarding the Hrud are indeed one and the same, as the more quote-unquote rat-like depictions given for the Hrud are noted to be wearing heavy cloaks and cowls, rendering it impossible to truly discern any defining physical features that these quote-unquote rodent Hrud may display. However, there does exist at least one confirmed physical discrepancy between these two portrayals of the Hrud, that of the tail, or lack thereof. As detailed within Xenology, a female Hrud specimen that had been obtained and dissected by the Inquisition would be described as bearing a womb-like structure that was suspended by a rudimentary tail, which in itself would be the only instance of a tail or tail-like appendage being recorded during the course of the creature's autopsy. But given that this particular Hrud was, as mentioned earlier, female, it is entirely possible that the presence of a tail is in itself an indication of sexual dimorphism within the Hrud species, with long tails being sported exclusively by male Hrud. Alternatively, perhaps these two different portrayals of the Hrud are instead depicting individuals of differing ages. After all, next to nothing is known with any degree of certainty in regards to the life cycle of the Hrud, meaning that it is potentially possible that younger individuals could very well sport longer tails, which they eventually lose upon reaching maturation, or vice versa. Or perhaps both creatures are indeed types of Hrud, albeit strains which had simply adapted to live within different environments. Such an idea isn't entirely outside the realm of possibility, as the Tau, for example, despite all being members of the same race, display drastically varying physical characteristics depending upon the caste that they belong to. The Tau of the Fire caste, for example, are noted to be large and powerful by the standards of their race, due to having evolved from plains-dwelling hunters that migrated across vast distances. By contrast, the Tau of the Aircast spot a lighter, more delicate bone structure, with their ancestors even evolving diaphanous wing membranes, which, in conjunction with their lightweight bodies, allowed them to glide through the air. As such, the rodent-like Hrud and the bendy Hrud could simply be members of the same species that had adapted to live within different environments upon their world of origin. But there is an altogether different possibility, in that these two differing depictions of the Hrud are in fact entirely different species. The reasoning for this particular notion is due to the fact that the original rodent-like portrayal given to the Hrud is not technically referred to as a Hrud, but instead referred to as a nocturnal warrior of Hrud. This particular name given for the creatures would initially appear to suggest that Hrud is not the name of the species, but instead refers to their world of origin. The rogue trader Janus Drake, as detailed within the Liber Xenologies, would even go on to mention how the given name of the Hrud may very well be a misnomer, as he would state that some of the Imperium's earliest reports regarding the Hrud refer to such creatures as the nocturnal warriors of Hrud. This in itself would also appear to indicate that the Hrud and nocturnal warriors of Hrud may indeed be different species, for during the course of the Great Crusade, the Imperium would refer to the quote-unquote bendy incarnations of the Hrud as being Hrud specifically, as opposed to nocturnal warriors of the Hrud. Although it is admittedly possible that the Imperium took to calling both of these creatures Hrud during the earliest days of the Great Crusade, or possibly even earlier. As such, it is not outside the realm of possibility for the Hrud and nocturnal warriors of the Hrud to be two entirely separate humanoid species that had convergently evolved upon the same planet, although the odds of such an event occurring are astronomically low. Whatever the truth may be, few can deny that the Hrud are one of the most insidious and dangerous races to exist within the entire galaxy, capable of bringing the entire galaxy to a very literal standstill. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching!